Yo, what's up everybody? We're back here on Chess.com's YouTube channel. This is International Master Daniel Rensch, and today we're going to continue our video series on openings, tournament openings that you need to know. We're here today to discuss another Sicilian. As you can see from our title, this is an opening video about how to play the Sheveningen and Classical Sicilians. Both of these Sicilians are two of the oldest, most popular Sicilians, and were much more popular during the 20th century as the mainstays in many great champions' repertoires, or great, very strong grandmasters' repertoires. Neither one of them is as popular now, both of them being looked over more commonly for the Najdorf and the Sveshnikov Sicilians. But we're going to talk about it as a means to really improve your knowledge of the Sicilian in general, and you'll see that the structure itself, the Sheveningen pawn structure, is one that occurs in almost every open Sicilian, probably outside of the Dragons and the Sveshnikovs themselves, which again, those two lines have already been discussed here on our chess openings playlist. You can check those out. But let's continue, and as we do, we're going to flip this board and check it out from Black's perspective. The Sheveningen Sicilian occurs after the move 2d6, and after d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, attacking the pawn, knight to c3. We're in a mainline open Sicilian where we've already discussed the Najdorf and the Dragon and others. And here we're going to talk about the Sheveningen itself. Now, this move order, as I said, I foreshadowed saying that it was one of the favorites of many great champions, probably the most notable of which was world champion Garry Kasparov himself, arguably the greatest player of all time. He enjoyed playing the Sheveningen, and also would commonly reach a Sheveningen structure after the move a6, basically playing a Najdorf, and depending on White's options here, as discussed in the Najdorf video, Black has two main options of play, that being either e5, a sharper, more mainline, actually traditional Najdorf itself, or after moves such as bishop e2, bishop e3, and even bishop g5, the main line, we can see e6, and this would be a direct transposition into a Sheveningen structure, even though the opening itself was the Najdorf. So when I say transposition or talk about the Sheveningen structure being important, that's what I'm referring to, that it occurs in many mainline openings, even if this particular move order is not as popular anymore. Why is it not as popular anymore? Well, not only did they give it up probably just for its sexier cousin or something, so why is it not as popular anymore? Well, mainly it's because of this move order with 6g4, known as the Carey's attack. It's a much more aggressive version of the English attack, which is something that can occur after the moves bishop e3, White plays the move f3, creating a solid structure, as we saw in the Dragon video. Although there it's referred to as a Yugoslav attack, here we see that the move f3 supports g4, and is very commonly a way for White to develop a counterattack on the king side. But this particular move order with e6, cutting off the bishop on c8, allows this attack to be accelerated and for White to be very aggressive and launch his pieces toward an attack on the king side immediately. Again, to highlight that point, after the move such as a6 and the Najdorf, we notice that g4 is not a possibility simply because the bishop on c8 has been left open. So I'm oversimplifying a very complicated opening repertoire, as well as probably oversimplifying something that was discovered by many hundreds and hundreds of games by very strong grandmasters over the last 25-30 years, basically saying that the reason why this move order isn't used anymore is because of the Carey's attack. I understand that it's not that simple, and obviously it certainly isn't the case that Black is resigning after g4. But in many cases, it makes sense for Black to play this move, prepare attacking on the queen side, as we've said in the Najdorf video, and force White, if he chooses to play for a English attack style, to play the move f3 first and support the move g4, whether it's right away with f3 or even after the move bishop e3, e6, and f3, as we would see as a mainline English attack in the Najdorf. So the Sheveningen itself is a very important structure to know. It's a flexible structure. It controls many of the important central squares. And because of that flexibility, it allows black to be aggressive with his minority attack on the queen side and usually get very good counterplay. However, this particular move order itself is not as popular anymore due to the immediate 6g4, this response. The Classical Sicilian, which I'm including within this video about the Sheveningen, mainly because it reaches the Sheveningen structure more commonly than perhaps any other Sicilian, is the move is the move 5 knight to c6 here. I slipped with my words there and said 2 knight to c6, and that's because in many cases the classical can also be reached after 2 knight to c6, and after d4 takes knight f6, knight to c3, we would see that a Sveshnikov is possible. Many of you have probably already watched that video in our playlist as it came first, which would be a completely different type of pawn structure and opening. But d6 via this move order would immediately transpose to the Classical Sicilian. You're seeing this position here, which can be reached via the move order we just discussed after 2 knight to c6, or it can be reached via the move order we first displayed with 2 d6, knight f6, and knight to c6. The main idea behind the Classical Sicilian is that black is obviously developing a piece on the queen side, putting immediate pressure on white's center, but to continue with that, black wants to, again, leave this bishop open, preventing immediate pawn storm ideas that are possible with the Carey's attack and the Sheveningen, and hope that with an early development of this queen to different squares, in some cases the knight and queen can work well together, putting immediate pressure on white's queen side. After the move bishop g5, which is the main line move here, black needs to play the move e6, as to otherwise run into bishop takes f6, destroying the structure. And after e6, we see the move f4 played. After a couple more moves, we see this move f4 come in, which is known as the Rouser variation of the Classical Sicilian, one of the most commonly reached positions in the Open Sicilian in the history of chess. It can also be reached after the move castles long and then f4. And you'll notice that these days, many times players do not accelerate f4 immediately and instead choose to develop the queen and castle long, if for no other reason than that to maintain some sort of level of mystery and flexibility, as after certain developments by their opponent, they may choose, rather than going for a classical Rouser system with f4, which of course makes sense, with this structure being a great way for white to combat the center that black has tried to restrict. So f4 makes a lot of sense, which is why it's the most popular variation to play against the Classical Sicilian. But many players choose this move order here as a way to maintain flexibility, as in case they would choose to play rather f3, which again, as we've already seen, is very obviously played to support the move g4. White would like to develop a different type of pawn storm on the queen side, on the king side in this case, and depending on how the game develops, for example, after h6, you might even see white voluntarily retreat this bishop, clearing the way for the pawns to get rolling. This would be known as an English attack structure, once again, something we've referred to in a couple of the different variations of the Sicilian now. So to summarize, the Classical Sicilian is with the move order with 5 knight to c6 or 2 knight to c6, as we already discussed the other option. And after bishop g5, e6, queen to d2. Again, there's a few different ways to develop here. a6, bishop d7, bishop e7. Those are all possible moves here. But the most common being a6, as it prevents the move knight to b5. One example might be that, just to show you very clearly that there's always possibilities for white to expose the open d file whenever you play a Sicilian with this move e6. So after the move a6, castles long, again we can see that there's a few different move orders here for black, but the most common being this, and white can either play a Rouser type of attack, which is the most classical, most common way for white to combat this structure, with the idea being to prepare one of these pawn breakthroughs at some point, or white can try to organize an English attack style structure, hoping for the move g4 and an eventual pawn storm on the king side. Black's idea in these cases is very simple, as we've already discussed. Moves like rook to c8, development of the queen to the queen side, combining that with a minority attack, the threats of opening up the c file further on the queen side, and usually at some point white might have to worry about in a breakthrough with d5 opening up yet another piece to join black's attack on the queen side. So these ideas are very general, and obviously we're summarizing some very complex openings in under 10 minutes here and giving less than 5 minutes attention to actually each of them, from the Sheveningen to the classical. But in quick summary, I would remind you that The particular move order of the Sheveningen is not as popular these days, being left behind for either a Najdorf or even a classical being more popular than this e6 move order right away. That's because of the carries attack. So for players looking for more information on that, you now have a suggestion from an international master about White's best approach here. It's the most aggressive approach, a way to launch an attack on the king side. And again, with the classical running into bishop g5, e6, queen d2, a6, and with the main choice coming on move 8 or 9 of the position, being that White can choose to play a Rouser type of setup where White tries to break open the center with one of these two moves, or an English attack style setup where White tries to support the move g4, generally retreating this bishop and organizing a pawn storm on the king side. Black's attack in all of those cases is very simply, we're going to do a different move order here to remind you of that possibility. Black's plan and play is very simply to develop an attack on the queen side, as he does in just about every one of the other Sicilians, with moves like rook to c8, developing the queen at some point to an aggressive square, and a minority attack. Hopefully Black will see all of those things come together and lead toward a good mating attack. That's it. We've discussed 2 more Sicilians. Rock and roll, Buttercup. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on Chess.com.